You know when you're watching an event and you're sat there puzzled because, well, it doesn't seem to make sense how people are reacting to what to you sounds like nonsense? Did you ever have that feeling? Anyhow, on a totally unrelated note, Elon Musk has shown us the future. One in which we are all ferried around in electric autonomous taxis. One in which traffic congestion is but a faint memory. And one in which our safety is all assured by systems that are infallible. And while there were plenty of cheers and whoops from the audience during the reveal event, as investigative reporting after the event has revealed, there was a fair bit of smoke mirrors and P.T. Barnum-style showmanship involved. But is it what our future will really look like? Or is it closer to bovine byproduct? Before I get started, I want to say a quick thank you to the authors of the papers on autonomous vehicle safety and public transit, and a bunch of related topics that we're covering in this video. Several of those authors kindly supplied us with full copies of their papers, and this video just wouldn't have been possible without them. Okay, I have to come clean. When we discussed making a video about Elon's amazing invention of ride shares, carpooling, and the bus, my brain went straight to that excellent tweet by Stefan Tanas. What's your favourite tech innovation? The illegal taxi company, the illegal hotel chain, fake money for criminals, or the plagiarism machine? That's because fundamentally nothing he showed us was new. Look, at the end of the day, Nikki and I rode in a driverless taxi in a geo-fenced environment in 2017. And minibuses? Well, I rode around in a clapped out Sherpa van when I was at school, and that was how we went on school trips. That was when this was all fields and I walked uphill both ways to school, through the snow. But yeah, the school sports teams used it and it did have a driver, but fundamentally, removing the driver isn't a huge leap for a company working on autonomous vehicles and making humanoid robots. Making it look like Fritz Lang's Metropolis is certainly a different look, but at the end of the day, it's a bus. But because he said so little in so many words, and what he said was often something that felt misleading, that sent me scurrying away to the data mine so I could find out which bits of his puffery, because we all know that's what this is, right? As the courts have affirmed, Elon can make up and say whatever he wants at these events, whether or not they have any relation to reality or reasonable timelines, because it's puffery. It's not expected to be believed by serious investors. It's the carnival barker telling you about the weirdness of their trove of wonders. Nothing to do with actual reality. So which bits of his puffery actually have basis in fact? Because watching a few toy cars run around in a playground doesn't tell us much. But, and it hurts to say this, it turns out that on something that I thought was outright misinformation, I was spectacularly wrong. So let's answer a couple of the big questions resulting from what he threw up into the world at this event. Are autonomous vehicles safer than human drivers? And will autonomous vehicles reduce the amount of traffic on the road and fix congestion? Early in the event, Elon made the claim that autonomous vehicles are safer than human-driven vehicles. Now, we've been very clear for the past N years that there aren't statistics that support that. In fact, we made a video, a whole long video, and much of the information in that video is still right. But as of this year, there is something closer to evidence. And let's start with the caveats, because I think it's important to understand the limitations of the study before we get all overexcited and start ordering pan-galactic goggle blasters and hopping off in our off-brand Blade Runner-style cabs. The study published this year in Accident Analysis and Prevention, all the studies are linked in the down below by the way, examined the collective safety of autonomous vehicles, in this case level 3 autonomous vehicles. Quick reminder, level 3 is a step on the autonomy ladder where the driver can take their attention off the road while the car is in charge, but it still requires the presence of a human in the driver's seat, and that person has to be ready to take over if the system requests or if there's a failure. Level 4 is autonomous in the vast majority of situations, and level 5 is where the vehicle can be fully autonomous and does not require a driver at all. Now, the level 3 autonomous motor vehicle collisions data was available for 2019, so it's important when thinking about this to be aware that in 2019 the majority of vehicles were operating in very restricted geofenced regions. I've asked the authors of the study about this, and they say that yes, the autonomous data is drawn from vehicles operating in specific geofenced areas, which are likely mostly urban. In comparison, while the naturalistic, i.e. human, driver data is drawn from all road types, they are also from specific areas of the country. However, quote, at the aggregated level, the comparison between autonomous vehicles and human-driven vehicles is still good enough or valid, end quote. These vehicles also often had a safety driver behind the wheel. Now, whether incidents where the autonomous vehicle did something, the driver disengaged and then was still unable to avoid a collision, it's not absolutely clear whether that would be counted as an autonomous vehicle incident or a human incident, and it would probably depend on the originating company for how that vehicle's incident was reported. There's also the question of comparability of the crash data, which, to be clear, is addressed by the paper. By comparability, I mean that it's probable that autonomous vehicles were mainly operating in urban environments, whereas the crash data for humans likely includes a significant amount of rural and semi-rural data. However, if that is the case, then actually things are looking worse for human drivers compared to semi-autonomous ones, because motor vehicle incident statistics are pretty clear that urban environments are where more crashes happen. Okay, with that out of the way, what does the paper say? Well, the average automated vehicle miles to crash is higher than for human-driven ones. How much higher? Human-driven vehicles were involved in incidents after 21,634 miles, whereas autonomous vehicles travelled 27,399 miles before an incident. So, yeah, autonomous vehicles did better. Now, I want to see more studies before I'll commit myself absolutely, because what I want is some really tasty large-scale data. This dataset is by no means huge, but there is now some not just theoretical evidence that autonomous vehicles can improve safety. I also want to see some studies that address vulnerable road users, in particular minority individuals and road users with disabilities, because I'm uncertain whether the disparities seen early on have been remedied. By disparities, I mean that the autonomous vehicle systems were less likely to correctly identify people of colour or people using assistive devices like wheelchairs as people, most likely because of inadequacies with the training data. If your team is unaware of its biases, then it's likely to feed that data in that is problematic and not notice. And that's what we'd seen. I'm intrigued to know whether that's been fixed because it's, well, kinda important. And how do I put this? Data throughput is usually prioritized by companies working on this kind of thing more than data quality. It's far more impressive to boast to shareholders and the press that you've got a gigaquad of training data under your belt than it is to say that your data set is comprehensive and free from biases. Oh, and as we reported in 10 recently, Tesla's FSD is currently under investigation following several collisions and a fatality, so take from this what you will. Okay, so despite the fact that Tesla built a huge fake backlot in which Elon's autonomous taxis could safely play without the danger of interacting with human drivers, without, say, the sudden catastrophe of having to route unexpectedly around roadworks, or indeed having to route around a motor vehicle collision, despite the fact that Tesla's demonstration neatly sidestepped double-parked trucks offloading a drunk group of post-football game fans looking to celebrate and staggering unexpectedly into the road or lobbing bottles at it. Despite the fact that it neatly sidestepped the real world, and you know how much it pains me to admit this, it may be that Elon is right about this specific issue. We may have hit a point where autonomous vehicles can, in certain circumstances, be safer than human drivers. Alright, now we've got the difficult, for me, bit of the video over and done with, we're back into the more familiar territory, where we're dealing with more hyperbole than anything else. The reason I got all hot and bothered was pretty early in the event. It was that Elon said, well, let's just hand over to Elon.
So with, and you said like how many hours a week are cars used? Your average passenger car is only used about 10 hours a week out of 168 hours. So the vast majority of the time, cars are just doing nothing. But if they're autonomous, they could be used, I don't know, 5 times more, maybe 10 times more. So you could actually, for the same car, would have 5 times as much value, maybe 10 times as much value. There's 168 hours in the week, and like I said, only 10 of them are used for driving.
Okay, so yeah, 24 times 7 is indeed 168. So there are 168 hours in the week. But it is either disingenuous or ridiculous to suggest that because cars are only used, say, 10% of the time, that by sharing them, that would fix traffic congestion. Because the reason a lot of those cars are sat unused during big chunks of the day is because their primary purpose is to ferry people to offices at the beginning of the workday and home again at the end of the day, because of things like, I don't know, Tesla's work from home policy, which is based on Elon's idea that it's morally wrong for people to work from home, and that remote work simply can't be as effective or as productive as working from an office. No, there's really not any evidence to support that. So yes, we could cut the number of vehicles by carpooling, a thing that already exists, or by allowing work from home, another thing that already exists. But autonomous vehicles don't fix the number of vehicles problem because you still need roughly the same number of vehicles to transport those people to work. Now, some studies have suggested that people are more comfortable car sharing in a way that they weren't before. Now they use services like Uber and Lyft. And that would potentially reduce the number of vehicles on the road somewhat, but it's not going to have the massive impact that is implied by Elon's statement. Now, those vehicles could then go off and be robo-taxis during the day, which might decrease overall car ownership, which obviously is a good thing. But the cost of that, however, is that robo-taxis patrolling around looking for rides, well, this leads to markedly increased miles driven by those robo-taxis and potentially worsens congestion. There's this idea that we've seen the results of with road building, that when you add an extra lane, you don't actually improve congestion. Instead, you create an incentive to travel by car that increases the number of people using that road. It's why you can't build your way out of traffic jams with just one more lane. It's one of the fundamentals of urban development, which a lot of politicians like to ignore, because building another lane sounds to people who don't know about urban development like they're going to fix the problem. Or they're at least trying to. And that idea of extra capacity inducing demand, it seems, also applies to autonomous vehicles. The presence of autonomous vehicles won't just lead to the journeys we already make in individual passenger vehicles transitioning to autonomous taxis, but will lead to people making new journeys that they wouldn't have made before, or that they would have made, but they'd have done it on public transportation. So while Elon says that autonomous vehicles will improve congestion, the vast majorities of papers say that isn't the case. While some studies have suggested that autonomous vehicles may reduce vehicle ownership, and I quote here, most studies show little impact on traffic flow and capacity until relatively high penetrations of vehicles with high levels of automation. Another paper modelling impacts of autonomous vehicles found that until 80 to 90% of vehicles on the road were being driven autonomously, autonomous vehicles actually made congestion worse. And that congestion only decreased when most vehicles are autonomous, because autonomous vehicles can theoretically, drive much closer together and in much narrower lanes. But that also requires the humans in the metal box being happy with being driven much closer to the vehicle in front and to the side. But more importantly, it also requires there not to be humans on the road screwing things up by suddenly running the wrong way through the maze or eating the wrong piece of cheese. Now, another of the generally argued benefits is that you could reduce the number of parking spaces, which, sure, if vehicle ownership goes down and our streets are instead filled with roaming taxis hunting for their next looking for their next ride, then yeah. But we could also just, do that. To be clear, in North America, parking spaces are a huge externality offloaded from car owners. Or to put it another way, a huge tax burden on us all, regardless of whether or not we own a car, where we all pay to provide discounted or free parking on land that could otherwise be useful, or usefully wild and biodiverse. And the number of parking spaces required is literally made up. Yeah, it comes from a big book, but the numbers in the book are nonsense. Climate Town made a great video on this. If YouTube's linky thing is working, it'll be there. So since we just made the numbers up, we could, just choose to make up some new ones and cut the number of parking spaces. Or better yet, try pedestrianising streets, since literally everywhere that's been done, it's been beneficial. Or instead, we can rely on Musk's headcanon shipping of ride shares and congestion reduction, despite the fact that current ride-sharing options increased road congestion in both intensity and duration. Perhaps we should take into account that he's had real notable success reducing traffic on Twitter, and perhaps his skills carry over. Oh, and studies have dispiritingly found that rideshare take-up also decreased public transportation ridership, which would make Elon happy since his documented statement on public transportation is,
I think public transport is painful. It sucks. Why do you want to get on something with a lot of other people that doesn't leave where you want it to leave, doesn't start where you want it to start, doesn't end where you want it to end, and it doesn't go all the time? It's a pain in the ass. That's why everyone doesn't like it. And there's a bunch of random strangers, one of whom might be a serial killer. Okay, great. And so that's why people like individualized transport that goes where you want, when you want.
But to do that makes me unhappy because, okay, the evidence is similar to that of autonomous vehicles. Buses don't technically massively reduce congestion. Although, when I say that, during a labour dispute on the Los Angeles transit system in 2003, average highway delays increased by 47%. The reason these two conflicting things can coexist is because, as with cars, when congestion drops because people are commuting on the bus, more people decide to make trips by car that they wouldn't have made because the congestion was too bad before everyone else piled on the bus. And people taking the most congested routes are more inclined to take public transit. Bike shares in the US, incidentally, have been found to reduce congestion by around 4%. I imagine that numbers from a country that actually has decent cycle lanes would be much better than that. But what bike shares and buses do is get a lot more people to that one place with lower energy consumption. And that's a good thing. And also, in general, buses have accessibility requirements, which, for all the much vaunted notion that autonomous vehicles will improve accessibility, the absence of a driver who's someone to help when there's a problem, or in particular in the case of Elon's autonomous robotaxi, that quite simply isn't designed to actually be accessible. If you're a wheelchair user or have mobility issues, getting in and out of his marginally futuristic Honda Insight Aptera knockoff is gonna be hard. Okay, so autonomous vehicles aren't the great god of fixing our urban environments, no matter what Leon says. What is, however, is difficult, because basically all the papers said the same thing. The things that fix our infrastructure are wildly unpopular with car owners, and thus unpopular with politicians. So instead of doing what works, lots of investment in public transport, building new infrastructure with transit in mind, building new infrastructure where homes and businesses are close to transit hubs, road dieting, that is reducing the number of lanes alongside building better transit infrastructure, all that stuff is unpopular with car drivers and then the US electorate. And that means that what we have to do instead is pick from a menu of things that we know just don't work as well. Talking of politicians, I've seen some pretty wild excuses online trying to argue that the reason Elon Musk is currently so behind Donald Trump's presidential campaign, and to be clear, I'm filming this before the election, it isn't actually because he supports far-right extremism, racism and xenophobia, but because he, and I'm paraphrasing here, wants to support Donald Trump so he'll remove all the regulatory hurdles that exist between Tesla's dream of robo-taxis becoming a reality for the good of all mankind. I would have words to share about dark gothic MAGA Elon. How's that third stage of grief treating you? It's not too late. Look, MIT recently published an article looking at the dawn of the automobile's stranglehold over our cities, and it reminded me that at one time the roadways were to be shared, and the onus was on the vehicle's operator to keep pedestrians and other road users safe. The streets of Chicago belong to the city, one judge explained, not to the automobilists. And when police tried to keep pedestrians out of the roadway, pedestrians, many of them women, would demand that police stand aside. In one case, he reported, women used their parasols on the policemen and the police relaxed enforcement. We need to start treating the car as what it is, a tool, sometimes useful, sometimes not. And autonomous vehicles are the same. But the claims of some people who stand to make a lot of money from them need to be examined very carefully, because a lot of them, like certain political arguments, truly don't stand up to any scrutiny. And the impact of the entrance of a bunch of autonomous vehicles into our transport ecosystem is going to be challenging. But anyway, I guess we'll all find out the impact in 2026 or 7 when Tesla rolls out its robo-taxi, just a year after it rolls out full self-driving. No, really. We'll find out what happens, because regardless of Tesla's actual timeline, we're already seeing other companies with autonomous vehicles make a periodic hash of transportation, and unless we get a handle on it now, we're heading into a future where transport isn't fixed, it's just a shinier version of the poop that we have now. Thanks for joining me today. And if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them below in our Discord chat room, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of the more than 1,500 people who help fund this channel through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and making sure that we can be 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. There's a range of different tiers you can sign up for, from as little as $1 a month, or if you pay yearly, just under $11 a year. A huge welcome to our newest supporters: Alan Brim, Jim, Sarah Horlock, Full Name, Todd Johnson, Roderick, Stuart Despain, Rupert Ronson, Larry Phoenix, Darla, Wendy Kelly Budenbaum, and Kay. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your week of fame. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at. Address is also down below. And if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store in the down below too. We've got some great content coming up, so make sure you've subscribed on PeerTube or YouTube, and we'll see you soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we think this one is also well worth a look. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving!